Pokemon Legends ZA has been out for a couple of weeks now, and it's already one of the best-selling releases in the franchise's history. But how does it stack up to the rest of the series? Well, that's a tough one for me to answer. After all, this is the first Pokemon game I've played on launch since Black and White 2 all the way back in 2012. I fell off the series after Generation 5 because it seemed like Game Freak was phoning it in and moving away from what us true, hardcore Pokemon fans wanted. I skipped out on X and Y because Game Freak moved away from sprites and I thought that was stupid. I skipped Sun and Moon because I was shaking my fist in anger at Game Freak had the audacity to remove gyms as a concept. And of course, I skipped Sword and Shield because of that really ugly tree. I was that kind of hater, you know? However, during the past year, I've gotten back into the series thanks to Scarlet and Violet, and I have to say, Pokemon Legends ZA is a pleasant surprise. Since I mentioned Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, let's start off with one of my biggest concerns about Legends ZA, the performance. Scarlet and Violet are notorious for just absolutely abysmal performance and having some of the craziest bugs you'll ever see. Also, the game's frame rate would dip and look like just an absolute slideshow pretty frequently. I had genuine concerns that this would be an even bigger issue with Legends ZA, especially since it was also being released on the Switch 2 simultaneously, and I'm stuck with the Switch 1 version. Thankfully, I had no performance issues whatsoever throughout my 50-hour playthrough of the game. I do think overall the textures are fine and generally are pretty consistent with the game's art style, flat windows included. One odd thing about Legends ZA's graphics though, in the texture work department, some of the closed instanced areas like the sewers are like really high quality compared to the overworld, and I found that like a little jarring, which I don't know if that's like the point or anything because there's ghost Pokemon down there and it might have to be unsettling, but like it kind of just makes the game feel a little incongruent even if it is technically better than the usual. Another one of those weird incongruent things are the cutscenes. The cutscenes are directed and framed really well, and the character models themselves are very expressive and sell the situations. However, there's still no voice acting. I'm not generally like a fan of the idea of voice acting in Pokemon, but Game Freak cannot be framing these cutscenes as if there is voice acting in the game. It's just super weird when everybody's so animated and their mouth is going wild and just nothing is coming out. They need to either keep this style and do voice acting or compose the cutscenes in a different manner and just forego voice acting. This weird in-between thing is not doing it for me. The other concern I had about Legends ZA was the real-time battle system. I never played Legends Arceus, so I don't know what to expect, and I was never really a big fan of the shift from turn-based to action and more traditional JRPG series like Final Fantasy. But Legends ZA's battle system is pretty solid. Your Pokemon will follow you closely until you command it, where it'll move to the appropriate position to fire off the attack. Once you get a feel for how your Pokemon will operate when you tell them to do stuff, you can begin smartly positioning them and have them follow you to manually dodge attacks. Also, there's a lot more going on with the moves in Legends ZA than simple base power and accuracy numbers from the standard games. Oh yeah, accuracy's gone. Focus Blast will definitely finally actually hit now, right? Well, not really. Different moves will have different startup times and lag, ranges, you name it. This made me have to re-examine what I know about certain moves from the traditional titles. For example, Ice Fang, Fire Fang, and Thunder Fang aren't that great in the traditional titles. But in Legends ZA, I found myself using them well into the postgame simply because they came out instantly, letting me nuke an opponent before their move can even fire off. Even moves that would normally be pretty similar in traditional games end up having quirks that set them apart. Sludge Bomb and Sludge Wave are pretty similar, with the main difference being that Sludge Bomb is single target while Sludge Wave hits everybody. In Legends ZA, this is reflected by Sludge Bomb remaining a range big poison attack, but Sludge Wave is a big melee range area attack centered around your Pokemon. You can mix and match these different moves to create different playstyles for the same Pokemon. At one point I was running Sludge Wave with Leech Life and Power Whip on my Victory Ball going full melee mode. Then I switched it up with a Sludge Bomb Razor Leaf Energy Ball build to keep at range. I'm also a big fan of how certain status moves were translated to the real-time system. Entry hazards like Spikes and Stealth Rock now create physical hazards on the field that Pokemon have to avoid. Partial trapping moves like Sandstorm and Fire Spin create an actual vortex on the field. And even Protect and Detect were converted to something similar to a parry. All of these changes give the battles a feeling similar to that of battles shown in the anime, where you got Pokemon running around and dodging stuff instead of relying on Focus Blast and Miss like it always does. Battles aren't the only part of the gameplay loop that's changed though. In Legends ZA, there is a day-night cycle that dictates what the usual expected fare, like Pokemon spawns. Uniquely in ZA, however, battle zones pop up at night, a free-for-all zone where trainers go to battle it out and move up the ranks of the ZA Royale. This design creates a gameplay loop where during the day you catch Pokemon, do side missions, buy clothes, you name it. But at night you can hop into the trenches and start fighting everybody you see. Thankfully this isn't a rigid gameplay loop, like you don't have to go into the battle zones if you don't want to. You just keep doing your side missions and catching stuff at night, but you will have to visit them to progress the main story. The main story itself is pretty serviceable. I find all of the characters to be really likable, which is more than I can say for some of the older games. Tawny, Lyda, and Naveen are the highlights for me. I think things like them assisting you in the rogue mega evolution battles and story beats like Naveen helping you reach Kanari help make them feel like actual characters and like friends and not just some random hanger-ons. I'm sure there were a lot of references to Pokemon X and Y that went well over my head, but the game still did a good job of explaining things well enough for somebody like me that skipped that generation, and I can follow the story. Also, I don't know what's in the water in Pokemon France, but everybody in this city is a total lunatic. Literally every NPC is crazy, saying the most out-of-pocket stuff, getting into the wackiest situations. It's insane. Seriously, every single side quest feels like a plot thread you'd expect Ash and the gang to run into in the old anime. There is a side mission where a Shuppet canonically saves a marriage. That's the type of nonsense we're dealing here, and I kind of love it. The pacing of the game is pretty good too, although it does do that thing that every single JRPG does where the first few hours is just the worst hand-holding you will ever experience. My favorite thing about Legends ZA, and this applies to Scarlet and Violet too, is that Game Freak has finally made it actually fun to catch them all. You know, like the whole tagline of the series? I never really wanted to complete my Pokedex in generations 1 through 5 because it was simply just unfun walking back and forth in the grass to find every little guy. Since Pokemon have moved away from random encounters towards the wild Pokemon appearing on the overworld, it's made catching them actually engaging and remove that sense of annoyance you get trying to find a Chansey in the Safari Zone. Legends ZA also has Alpha Pokemon too, which are just a bigger version of regular Pokemon. I found myself catching duplicates of Pokemon I already own, just like the big idiot Alpha version, simply because it's cool. There are things I'm definitely not crazy about in Legends ZA though. I'm not a fan of the lack of abilities. I feel like some Pokemon are just defined by their ability, and it's bizarre not including them. Especially when the game is centered on Mega Evolutions, where the big deal in Gen 6 was that the abilities usually changed. I think it's sort of weird that 3 Mega Stones are locked behind ranked battles, which I haven't even tried yet, by the way. I think the ranked section would require its own separate video. And while the Infinite ZA Royale in the postgame is cool, I still miss a traditional Battle Frontier style postgame. But if I've accepted we'll never get that again and I'll never be able to do rental battles. Overall, I definitely recommend Legends Z if you fell off the Pokemon wagon like I did so many years ago. When we were kids watching the anime, we all imagined what Pokemon games might look like in the future. That one day they'll be just like the anime. Legends Z might not live up to the wild imaginations we had when we were kids, but I think it's pretty close.